Kaylyn, thank you so much for joining us today on the What is a Good Life podcast. Since last speaking with you, I've been very much intrigued to see where this conversation goes today.
I'm excited to be here.
So, as you are aware, we jump straight in with, is there a question you're exploring as you move through life?
There is. I think that I was lucky to have this experience, although it's a really terrible experience. When I was in my late 20s, I was a manager of training, manager of training, yes, for a company on the East Coast. I had a boss that was a really great mentor for me. And she had just gotten married for the first time at the age of 40. And within a week of her marriage, her husband found out he had pancreatic cancer. And he only lived another 14 months or so after that. And so I went through that whole process with this mentor and friend, but I was also an observer of it as well. And it really created in me this idea of valuing life at a young age. You could be younger, but for me, it seemed like a young age to be faced with that idea. And somewhere around that time, I also read Tuesdays with Morrie. And in that book, Mitch Albom talks a lot about the bird on your shoulder, saying, is today the day? And I think that's a question, right? Because his framework is, instead of avoiding death, look at it as a guide for how you want to live, right? Because we can't avoid death. So you might as well look at it as a guide. And so I think that has been a question that I've always asked, is today the day? And what regrets would I have if today was the day? What's the thing I haven't done yet that I really want to do? Or the thing I haven't said that I really want to say?
This is a beautiful contemplation, and I've actually interviewed a few death doulas who, strongly endorse the kind of contemplation around death or end of life and things of this nature. Just for you, was that a kind of a big shift to take that on at the time, or how would you say that kind of became part of your makeup?
Yeah, I think it was a big shift. I was I had not known what I wanted to do with my life. I was going to school, going to college, university, and taking classes, but just taking classes I liked. I had no idea what I wanted to do. But I was working at a restaurant, and they sent me to open one of their restaurants somewhere else. And I was like, oh, this is great. I can train adults. And that's what really opened me up to this idea. And so I did that. I did that for a long time, where I would open these restaurants. I mean, I'd be in charge of the opening, and I think I was making $125 a day, working 16-hour days. Like, it was ridiculously low pay, but it was the best. I loved it. Um, and I was following that path with a lot of passion. And then the next step is to do something like take an in-house position, salaried position, as this manager of training. I became a director of training when this mentor left. And then I was offered a job somewhere else as a vice president. So I was a vice president before I was 30, which, hey, cool. It's almost the pinnacle, at least in the training world. But I hated it. So I hated it. I wasn't doing training, right? Like, there was very little training going on anymore versus opening a restaurant. I was writing a lot of training modules and also helping out with marketing, which I was not interested in, and dealing with investors and just all kinds of things that were not within that world of passion. And I felt like I had to. I felt like this was the only path. So in some ways, I felt trapped until I started contemplating that question, is today the day? Because once you contemplate that question, then it's much easier to go, you're not trapped. Like, you have so many options. You live in a free country. You have enough experience to be able to pull it into something else. And so at that point is when I started really going, okay, when does time fly, right? It's a little bit of the strengths finder thing, although I did not have that framework of, when you're doing something that you love, time flies. When you are doing something that you're really good at, it makes you feel strong. So, what are those things? And so, in the process of doing that, I ended up leaving that job and going out on my own. And I was a subcontractor, so working for other people in sales training, customer service training, that kind of thing, which, yes, I mean, once I started doing that, I absolutely loved it. It was like, yes, this is what I'm meant to do. I'm meant to work with adults. I'm meant to make their jobs easier, their lives better. And my career just took off from there, right? Because that was incredible, but also you're limited when you're a subcontractor. You're waiting on people to give you work. So from there, I was like, okay, I have autonomy. Now I want certainty. And thus the company that I have now was born out of that several years later, 2007, 2008.
And just the significance along that way of autonomy for you. Could you just describe your kind of relationship with that?
Autonomy, it depends on which expert you talk to, but I think almost every expert out there on motivation talks about autonomy, right? So Daniel Pink will say that what we're after is not right. He takes economics. I don't know if you've read his book Drive, but he takes economics and says the economic model of, the carrot and stick doesn't work if you really look at the research. And so he boils it down to how people are after autonomy, mastery, and purpose, right? And I think it makes so much sense when you think about it, right? So I want to be self-directed. And, we see this in so many ways. People have a need to be self-directed, period. They just do. Not all the time, not in every situation, but they need to have that. And that's where you see like teenagers rebelling because no, thank you on the self-direction or being directed by parents. Mastery, getting good at something. I mean, that feels amazing. We all know that when it comes to exercise, we should probably like mix it up and do all these different things all the time. It's better for our body, but then we don't get mastery. Right? That's why we stick to one or two things. And then purpose. I mean, we definitely see how purpose drives people as well. I think that you see it especially in people that retire, empty nesters, right? They feel like they've lost their purpose and have to find something else to throw that into. So autonomy is important in that model. There's also SCARF, which is the David Rock neuroscientific model of how we see threat and reward in today's world. And the SCARF model, it's each letter stands for something to do with reward. One of A is for autonomy. Like in that model too, we need autonomy. When we don't have autonomy, we feel like we're being dragged down. We don't feel like we're at our best, and we don't feel safe enough to be creative and take risks. So I think that I knew I wanted autonomy always, but when I started doing more of this work, I started uncovering more models that confirm that just as human beings, we all want it to some degree.
And just out of interest for you, can you think of a moment where you felt a sense of that autonomy being realized? Like, does anything specific come to mind?
Yeah, one of the things that my business partner and I talk about a lot, we met when we were subcontracting for a different company, and we were doing leadership workshops and co-leading them. And at one point, after doing a few of these, the company we were working for, so the third party, they decided to fire my business partner. We weren't partners yet, but the co-lead. They decided to fire her. They called me and told me they were going to fire her. We were all going to that office for a training that day. She was picking me up and giving me a ride to go to this office for this training. And they called me and said, we're going to fire her today, but don't tell her. I was like, what? You want me to have this woman take me to this training, be in the car together for an hour each way, and you're going to fire her and I don't tell her? That was a really big moment because I was like, I'm not doing that. So I will walk away from our relationship. So I will use my autonomy to walk away from our relationship and lose money, lose income, in order to do that. And that was, it didn't feel sacrificial. Like it didn't feel like, oh, I'm making this big sacrifice. It felt like I'm exercising my autonomy. This company is not living the values we teach in the front of the room. what's the point in having your own company if you can't live the values that you're teaching? And so it felt empowering rather than a sacrifice.
This is a theme that is coming up quite frequently in my life and in these interviews as well. The significance of that ability to be able to, sounds like almost having some inner and outer coherence. You know,
Yeah.
just from your point of view, when you have moments like that, can you describe what that does to your sense of self almost?
I think it's the coherence. I mean, that was so well said. It feels like you're in your body and mind, like it's all aligned. It's all aligned. And so even though you don't know where it's going, like I'm a realist. I knew that, walking away from that income could really be bad. Like I wasn't um like, oh yeah, we're going to go prove them wrong and go rule the world. And like, I was not like that at all. But I was at peace.
Yeah.
I was at peace because I knew that was the choice I had to make to feel that coherence.
Oh, when you say that, that does something to my, I don't know, my body or something, because I think through many of these interviews, this is one of the more significant and yet understated aspects of life that, even we can be so caught up with the external, and look, money and and contracts and all these things are important things, and yet it's incredible that you can do something, don't know where it's going, but it's almost like if you're interested in that coherence, you don't really have a choice in what you're about to do. There is just one thing to do.
Yeah. Unless you want to feel the way I felt when I was working those other jobs, right? Which is almost trapped, right? That feeling of I don't have a lot of options. And that was just not worth it to me.
Yeah. Just curious for you, was there a moment, or was this a gradual thing where you cultivated some sense of trust, whether that's in yourself or in light in the wider life itself?
I think that I did not innately have that self-trust growing up. I definitely felt a bit like a round peg in a square hole because the typical markers of success were not things I was interested in or compelled by. I was in a small town in Texas, growing up 70s and 80s, middle child, divorced parents, and grandparents that were also helping raise us because my mom was going to, long hours working. And my older and younger sisters both were the more typical successful kids. They did well in school, really well in school. Um, my younger sister really was also quite popular. She got along with everyone. And I did not care that much about academics. I mean, I did fine, but I didn't try very hard and didn't care a lot. Wasn't motivated by it. And I also would inadvertently make people mad and be disliked. I mean, I don't even know what that was about. I still can't tell you what it was about because eventually, by the time I went off to college, like friendships and everything became much easier. And I actually found school much more interesting because professors were really interesting compared to the learning I was doing in college. But, somewhere along the way, post college, I had an older sister who was a Gulfstream jet pilot, like very successful on paper. And she had moved back to the town I grew up in. She was renovating a Victorian home and had been chosen to be on the walk of homes for Christmas or something like that. My younger sister was working on her master's in nautical archaeology. She was on 60 Minutes with Hugh Downs diving in Turkey, diving a shipwreck in Turkey. And I was taking classes I wanted to take, had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. And At one point, I was joking to my mom, my sister, when her house was chosen to be on the Walk of Homes. She had asked me to come and help her decorate for Christmas. And I said to my mom, you know, I can just see you as you're meeting people that come to the house and you talk about, yes, this is my oldest daughter. Yes, she flies Gulfstream jets. My younger daughter, oh, did you see 60 Minutes? And then, oh, Kaylyn made the bows. And I thought that was quite funny. And my mom really pushed back and said, don't ever talk about yourself that way,
Hmm.
because that's not how I see it. And she sent me a card in the mail, and it was the quote from Ralph Waldo Emerson about um, what what is a good life, what is a valuable life. It's the one where he talks about, are you leaving a garden plot better than where you found it? Are you leaving a person better than what you found it? That is success.
Yeah.
And I think that when she really pushed that and then sent me that card, that's the first time that I was like, okay, so success is not one definition, right? Maybe I can trust myself to just follow my instincts and see if it will lead me somewhere where I can find success.
Oh, that's so beautiful. I just love the idea of your mum pushing back on that as well. That's a really beautiful thing to hear. And even that Ralph Emerson quote as well. I was one that I had a copy of for quite a long time. For one
Yeah.
life to breathe easier because of you, or
Yes.
something. And that is
Yeah.
success.
Because
Yeah.
you have lived.
But can you tell me just what was it about that ideas of typical success? Because it's interesting even just where your career would have panned out to at this point. But just at that time, what can you recall what your relationship was with those typical ideas of what success
Yeah.
were?
And I don't know whether it was the place I lived, the time period I was living in, but I really believed there was only one way, and that was that you were employed with an employee that was very stable. That God forbid you had to wear pantyhose every day, those kinds of things. You had to sit in traffic every day, and you had to do whatever was expected, regardless of your interest, passion, even ability. I did have a job for quite a long time working in a CPA firm while I was in college. I would go there and do whatever they told me to do. I was there for a couple of years. I think I made $4.50 an hour, and it was the most boring work imaginable. And I think I truly believed like this is a path to success. If I stay here long enough in this really boring job that I don't want to do, then I can eventually be promoted enough to have some type of livable wage, and now I will be successful. And of course, that did not seem enticing. But I didn't know another way. I really didn't. It just wasn't an example that I had. I wasn't surrounded by entrepreneurs. I wasn't surrounded by tech. I wasn't surrounded by any of those things.
And just for you, when you consider, I'd just love to know what it was like actually when you received the letter from your mum.
Mm. It was amazing. It was really amazing. So much so, well, my oldest daughter is named Emerson after Ralph Waldo Emerson.
You know what's astounding to me, and even in I recall in a group conversation I was hosting at one point where when someone was lamenting the fact that they hadn't had something figured out, or they had made the same, they'd gone through the same pattern again, and someone else in the group just pointed out, what if you're not supposed to figure it all out yourself?
Mm,
And throughout these interviews, there's so many moments where you can just see someone taking the time to do something like that
yeah.
and are having such a profound effect of not even only on a life path, but with the name of a child as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. It was permission in a sense, right? She gave me permission to look at success in a different way. And I think that's been a theme because certainly in my line of work as an executive coach, you are helping people find fulfillment, and everybody has a different path to fulfillment. And then you see it in different ways too, right? I was in Silicon Valley for years. That's where our business started. It's where our business is still based. And even living there, you it's the same as where I grew up. You get steeped in where you are. And when you're there, you're like, oh, the only way to be successful is to get stock at one of these really successful tech companies, start a successful tech company, get venture capital. Like you really start to believe that's the only way. And then, you do something like several years ago, our family flew into Denver, Colorado, and then drove to Saratoga, Wyoming to go to a guest ranch. And on that drive, which was 4 or 5 hours, you're passing these homes and these towns and nothing, like you're passing, just fields and mountains. But there'll be nothing, nothing, nothing. And then all of a sudden there's something. And you're like, well, those people have a completely different life than what I'm used to. But there are so many ways to have success, to have a good life. Like it's not a one size fits all.
Yeah, I hadn't actually thought of that before. The idea that my idea of success will be so shaped by where I am specifically. I probably have a wider thought around it being general Western values or something to that effect.
Yeah.
But that is so it's so interesting just from your two roles that you mentioned, that like one would be this is the version of success, and then when you're in Silicon Valley and having lived in Vancouver before in
Yeah.
various capacities, stock and the idea of options and all sorts of things is very clear path to success as well. Just when you were going through this, that path as from your childhood, and even just that path you're alluding to from going into training and different things, and then this mentor of yours going through that experience. Just wondering from just how you face even the is this a day to day moment that, or reckoning this idea of like, what if today is the day, or how would you say that kind of has influenced you in just the kind of felt experience of life?
It's not day to day. It should be. Like I think it would be a better experience if it was truly day to day. It's probably a really good journal prompt to use every single day, maybe in the morning and the night, for 3 minutes even. Like that
Yeah.
would be an incredible practice. I should do that. Maybe I'll start doing that. But it is recurring. So when I feel at any type of crossroads, or when I feel a wall, which, just the normal rhythm of life is that you're going to have those moments. That's one of the things I go back to, right? What if today is the day? What have I not done? What have I not said? What would be the shift and the change? When in 2017, our business was really successful, and we were living in Silicon Valley. My husband worked for the sheriff's office, and we were trying to figure out where we were going to go next. We knew we wouldn't stay in California forever, in Silicon Valley forever. And so we flew to Park City, Utah, because some friends told us to look at homes for someday. We ended up making an offer on a home. And in 2018, we moved to Park City, Utah. So it ended up being a really abbreviated timeline versus our intention. And this is pre-COVID, before it became a big lifestyle community that it is now. But we decided to do that. We realized my husband could retire sooner than he thought, and we could make that change. That was a moment of, is today the day? Because I knew that by leaving, it was somewhat risky, right? I was going to be in a different place from my business partner and where the business was based. But I also knew that I would have more margin in my life to be with my kids, who at the time were in third and fourth grade.
Mm.
And I knew that margin would really matter to me. I knew, like, I fought very hard to, in Silicon Valley, still be able to pick them up from school, let's say 3 days a week, have some time with them, and then go back to work after I put them in bed at 8, right? like a lot of parents, that became my rhythm. And that is a great rhythm versus not seeing them till 6, 7, all the things that people have to do in this world. So it wasn't a sacrifice, but that doesn't mean I didn't want more. I wanted
Yeah.
more, right? I really, they still liked me. I really wanted that time before they didn't like me anymore. And that was incredibly valuable. I mean, I'm really happy we did that. Even though COVID changed everything and the world changed drastically, and the town that we live in is now much bigger, and all of those things, there is no doubt that it changed the rhythm of our lives and our family in a very positive way.
Can you talk to me about the significance of that time with children? I'm I must say, anytime I hear anything about parenting now, I just have one, and I'm getting broody for a second. So anytime I hear about parenting, I'm just like, ah, especially with commitments that you're talking about, like just from your perspective, what was the significance of that decision?
I've never been the parent that, we've always had people that, and I shouldn't say always, when the kids were younger, we had people that helped us. And not, we didn't have full-time help or anything like that, but we had different people that were with us for a long time that could help take them to school, and sometimes pick them up. And when they were very young, keep them for longer. In fact, our creative director for our company was their first babysitter when they were very young. They were like 6 months and 20 months old. So she's known them, and she still works for our company now, and they're 17 and 18. So I was never one of those parents that felt a loss that my kids had a close relationship with their caregivers. I always felt like that was a great added bonus to their life. I love the idea that my kids have always had all of these different female influences that show up in different ways. I just think it adds to their life. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. But I also knew enough. I have stepdaughters as well, but I knew enough that about what adolescence does to kids to know that they would naturally pull away, right? They're going to naturally strive for independence and pull away. And I very much wanted more time with them to know them and understand them before they started grabbing that independence and dealing with, they're both girls, dealing with, what I still think is a pretty mean girl culture in middle school, at least in America, everywhere I've lived. I just wanted to see that in them. I wanted to see who they were and really understand them before that happened. I also really liked the idea of kind of shaking up the world and forcing change in some ways to drive resilience, help them figure out that they could completely change schools and lives and neighborhoods and everything else, and still find friends and find teachers they liked and all of those things. So I liked all of that. My husband did as well. So we were for all of that. And it was fantastic. I mean, particularly where we moved, it's a very outdoor life. Not to say California isn't, but California's hard. Like you can go to the beach and you can go to the mountains. You're going to sit in a lot of traffic to do that unless you want to do it at 3 a.m. And that was not true in this town, right? As soon as you get to this town, you are outdoors for all the seasons with very finite amount of time to do things. Like, you only have a few months to ski. You only have a few months to hike, that type of thing. And so you do it. And one of the best things that we did is that, the kids learned to ski and we learned to ski all at the same time. And they were much better than us. And so they became our guides, guiding us through the trees and down the hard slopes and all of those things, and still do to this day. So that was fantastic time together to see them master, right? So again, that autonomy, mastery, purpose thing, to see them do all of that. And I think that was instrumental to the point where even when we talked about who they missed in California, they would say, yeah, totally missed this or that, but I get it. I get why we did this. I see the value. yes, I'm with you so much more than I was before. And certainly with their dad, right? He had no flexibility in his schedule as he worked for the sheriff's office. He was a lieutenant when he left, and he had no flexibility with his schedule and was also running the SWAT team, so could get called out at any time. And he didn't work at all for the first 2 years when we moved here. And so they had all that time as well. I mean, privilege,
Yeah,
absolute privilege.
yeah, but it's I don't know, like there's something about this life where, and look, everyone's can just pursue whatever it is they feel is important to them. Like as you said, there's so many ways to live this good life, like a good life from whatever your perspective is. But it is incredible just the significance of what you're describing there, and like time with family, because we are part of cultures where that just isn't a given. Do you know what I mean? Like that it has to be either strategized for, planned for, saved for,
Yeah.
enough privilege for, whatever it may be. So when it is experienced, I find there's something really kind of heartwarming about that idea of even your husband not having much flexibility in a schedule, then to just having 2 years of total freedom for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get that we were incredibly lucky to have that time and be able to do that. Um, and then when the pandemic happened, it changed our business. It was devastating to our business overnight. So then, we had to pivot and figure things out. And my husband bought a couple of businesses and he works his tail off again now and all of those things.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So there are these rhythms to life and you never know what's coming and what to expect. But I would never regret having that time with them. And then they're leaving soon.
But
I could
it
work
isn't
for a
isn't
month.
but isn't that a beautiful observation as well, though? Like I think ideas of balance are often kind of sticks to beat ourselves with,
Yeah.
and so often I'm finding in life that I'm responding as well as I can and making the best decisions that I can within the constraints that I face, and of course with some intention as well. But
Mhm.
I think even just to be aware of what you said there is very helpful for whatever balance that people may be hoping for at some point, but just knowing the constraints within that at times. Just
Yeah.
as you've mentioned it a couple of times, the that sense of autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and even just from your perspective of moving through, and your mum suggesting that don't ever speak to you about yourself like that. You're talking about an older and a younger sibling, and thoughts around that. And then also just the way you said that clearly the work of training people and working with people and helping people it's a moment where you, or a space where you feel time really moves quickly, and that being a clue for you. When did that begin to develop more, I guess maybe even intentionally for you?
Once, I mean, my career, I would say, has been very organic. I did not have that master plan of, right, I'll get this degree and then I'll go get my master's or my PhD or whatever the thing is, and I'll start a business or I want to be VP by a certain age. Like it was never that. It was, I don't know what my options are when it comes to teaching adults. I just know that's where I light up. So I'll take what I can get. Right. For a while, it was opening restaurants. And then I went internally for hospitality groups to write training and do training. Um, Realized that eventually that was not going to be something I could do in a way that I really enjoyed. So went out on my own, subcontracted, did that for as long as I could. I really ended up starting a business for a couple of reasons. One was that I had my kids. And so before that I was traveling, mostly in the US, but I went to 48 out of the 50 states teaching workshops.
Wow.
And that's really hard to do with babies. I mean, I did for a little while. I would fly my mom and a baby somewhere. And I did that for a little while, but it's hard. And you can't continue to do it as they get older and they're in school and that kind of thing. I mean, you can, but then you're not with them at all. So that was a motivator um, to start my own business, which really would feed that autonomy. But I had a lot of fear around it too. I had a lot of fear back to trusting myself and my ability to do it well, my ability to go out and sell and market and do those things. I already mentioned that when I was the VP, they had asked me to do some marketing stuff and I did not like it. So I did not think myself good at it. My belief was that I could not do that well. But I had, we're always in life either making an intentional choice to do something, or we have so much pain, we make a choice to get out of the pain that we're in. And with my second pregnancy, I got put on bed rest 6 months into the pregnancy, or yeah, I think I was 6 months pregnant. And when I got put on bed rest, I lost thousands and thousands of book dollars. And it was painful. It really was frightening for my husband and I about how we were going to survive losing all of that money. And there was a reframing question that I used to teach in a class that I want to credit it with maybe Harvard Business School, a reframing class, but it wasn't called reframing. It was called, it was like a difficult conversations class that maybe Harvard offered. But the question is there something here that I'm not seeing? But if I did see it, it would change how I feel right now. Right? So this idea that when we are feeling pain, we tend to our focus becomes narrow, pain and stress. Our focus becomes narrow because we're just fixated on that, the pain. But if instead you say, is there something I'm not seeing? That if I did see it right now, it would change how I feel. That idea of just opening up the aperture to see possibilities and see them sooner could improve your life, right? Because we've all been through hard things that when we looked back on it, we said, oh, that was horrible, but I see how it improved my life. Well, what if we could see it in the moment, right? What if we could take advantage of it sooner, whatever that thing is, rather than waiting 5 years and then looking back and understanding with perspective? So that was the question that we taught in some of the classes that I led for this company. And when I got put on bed rest, I started contemplating that question. Now, not immediately. First, I went to, oh, this is horrible. This is terrible. Like, how are we going to survive? I did all the normal things first. And then I was like, that question. And when I asked myself that question, I realized that, I had time. I had potentially 3 months when I wasn't chasing my other baby, right? Because I couldn't. I was on bed rest. So I had 3 months of doing nothing but sitting in this bed. I was not going to have that again. I was about to have two babies 14 months apart. So how could I use that time? And I realized I could use that time to start building a business. And that's when I reached out to now my business partner, asked her to partner with me. It's when I created my website, I created my LLC. Like, that's really the birthplace of the business.
Well,
And I don't
that's
even know if
a
that's a question. Like, did
no,
that even answer?
no. This this ties in perfectly. Like, but there's but wow, what a to be on bed rest and be giving birth to a company at the same time too. That's that's wow. But the idea of that question is gorgeous. Though I'm
Yeah.
really intrigued. Can you even recall a moment where it went from that space of this is hardship, how are we going to do this, to even just a somewhat of an opening?
Yeah. I think it's back to what we originally talked about coherence. My original reaction, I think, is just the very human reaction we all have about devastation, pain. It's almost that change curve of, right? First you're in denial, and then you're in depression, and then, maybe you start to come out of depression to negotiation, whatever the things are. I think I went through all of that. But of course, back to coherence, I had to stop and go, wait. I know tools. Like, I'm lucky enough to know tools. I'm lucky enough to teach tools. So for me to just stay in, what we call the victim pool, right? So to just stay in that place of powerlessness, it's not going to serve me. So why wouldn't I take advantage of these things I teach? And who am I if I teach them and don't use them? Right? I've got to be coherent.
I've spoken to many people, and in through various sense of kind of traditional success or success in whatever way they frame it, I guess. But there's something just really beautiful about finding out who we are in moments of necessity.
Mm.
And just what you described there as well, of this almost this space for coherence to emerge, or to lead us ourselves with. There's something incredibly affirming about that. Like, I
Mhm.
don't mean this in some manifest whatever you want and your dreams will come true, but there's just something really in the grounded, the spaciousness perhaps of a question, but then also that spaciousness, allowing you to acknowledge what you are, and seeing what you have at your disposal.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
For you,
Absolutely.
just even going through that experience, how do you think that affected your capacity? Just because you touched on it there, who would I be if I didn't, if I was teaching this but not living it? Just given I had asked about mastery and you landed on that, just how do you suspect that experience shaped you, just in terms of how you show up to the work that you do?
The experience didn't end there. So that's where we were. We were talking about how organic my career was, which it was. But once I landed on I can start a business now, this thing that my husband had kind of been like tapping me on the shoulder to do for a while. Once I landed on that, and Terry and I started our business, it was 2008 by then. So it was a terrible
Perfect.
time to start a business.
Perfect. Yeah.
Terrible. And we worked our tails off, right? My husband was working nights at the time. I had babies that weren't sleeping, and then I'd get up and go meet Terry, and we would go, pound the pavement and work on creating curriculum to teach adults, and all of those things that we were doing, and going nowhere, right? Because how could a company hire us in the midst of firing a bunch of people, right? They just can't. And so, the story continues, right? It was a good year before we got our very first gig. And we were very frustrated, and we were very pessimistic. Will this work? Will this not work? And I think it's great to have a partner in those ways, because you help each other. Like, you're usually not at the same place at the same time. So when one is pessimistic, the other one can pull them up. And I think we had a lot of that over that year. And then once we got the first gig, great. Um, we did some creative things to try to get traction. I volunteered for a group of people that had lost their jobs, and we would meet once a week to work on resumes and bring in speakers to motivate them and that type of thing. And I was on the committee that helped do that. And in that process of volunteering, I had a different organization that was doing something similar in a different place that reached out and asked me to come speak. So I went and spoke to their organization. The guy in charge of that organization was leading up human resources for a pharmaceutical company. And he brought us in, and they ended up being a huge client of ours for several years. So I think that um, taught both of us that you just never know where you're going to find your leads. Like, you can have all the marketing plans in the world, but you don't know where things are going to land that actually take you somewhere. So I think that was one of the things that was really helpful, is that we did find success through a really different avenue. And then, from there, I think that, we continued to really fight some battles and fight against the tide for a bit, right? That recession was a bad one. I mean, it was terrible. And we didn't know if we would ever do more than hopefully just keep ourselves busy with work. Like, if she and I could keep ourselves busy with work, great. We did not know where it would go, but we did have each other and we kept encouraging each other. And during the, crawl out of that recession, one thing about Silicon Valley is that a lot of companies were born and grew really quickly once 2010 hit. Facebook, Meta, they're a big client, and um, we were in there pretty quickly and pretty early and grew with them. And so it did end up paying off, like in a way, and in a way that we never could have anticipated, in a really positive way. But I think resilience is really about continuing to put one foot in front of the other with a long-term goal in mind, like something that you're working toward. But once you have that long-term goal in mind, you can't keep looking at it, in my opinion, because it just feels so far away that it can be defeating, for me anyway, in my style. So after I have the long-term goal, it's about every single day. Like, what can I do today that will move the business forward? What can I do today to be able to pull in some of our excellent trainers that work for us and our excellent coaches to go improve the lives of people across the globe? And it's still what we're doing, because COVID decimated things because we were doing so many live trainings, right?
Right.
So, I mean, you just keep practicing those skills and practicing those skills.
Just out of interest for you, then, how would you describe your journey with resilience? You've touched on a number of positions where it seemed like you were showing up for certain anyway. Was resilience something that you felt was somewhat innate with you, or how would you say you've experienced that?
I think that's such a funny thing, because I wonder about that all the time, especially when we talk about different generations, right? In terms of Gen
Mm.
X and millennials, and, I have these kids that are Gen Z. Man, I hate to be this way. I think Gen Xers have a lot of resilience just naturally. Like, I don't know if it was because we were latchkey kids. Like, I don't know whether it was because, our parents were really distracted. I don't know. And I don't know if that's accurate. Like, if we actually did research, I don't know if research shows that Gen Z is more resilient, but I know a lot of Gen Zers that are very resilient. And I know that my husband and I have a lot of conversations with our kids of coming, like, come on, are you kidding me? You can do this. Go do this. It's not hard, right? My daughter is a ski instructor this winter, and she had a training day last week. And when I went to wake her up for it, she's like, I can't. My throat hurts. I'm not going. I'm like, what do you mean? Of course you can. Get your butt up. You're going. And then sure enough, she had a great day. Like, it was wonderful. It was
Yeah,
wonderful.
yeah,
And I probably was the same way at 18. I might have done the very same thing, but that's a classic case of, is, the things that we think as generations, is she going to have enough resilience to deal with this very tough world?
yeah. It's I don't know. There is something fascinating about. I think I really liked what you said there, just about, okay, of course, you can have a longer term goal, but really, it's putting one foot after the next,
Mhm.
and there's just something so simple about that in terms of just the moment to moment, and just the responding to life as it's happening. Because out of so many people I've interviewed, the plan could be many things, but and the plan takes, and the goal has a significance, of course, but it can be unexpected, as you have found as well.
Yeah.
I'd
Even the
love to add.
Bible, what is the, yeah, what is the, is it John Lennon that said, make plans, God laughs, whatever, whatever the thing is, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. I love that expression as well. For you, I'm really intrigued. Obviously, there's a couple of questions I ask on this podcast, but to start and finish. But the idea of even just that bird on the shoulder again, and just what if today is the day? What comes to mind for you for things like, okay, to keep that question in mind, like what do I need to tend to? Like what occurs for you?
A big theme more recently in the bird on the shoulder is, my aging parents, specifically my mom, because my mom was the one that raised us after my parents divorced when I was quite young. I was 6. And so she was very much the day-to-day parent. And when my youngest daughter was born, she moved out of Texas and came to California and lived near us for all those years. And then when we moved to Utah, she now splits her time. She's in Utah half the year, and then she's in Texas half the year. So she's just very much a part of our lives. She's 83 and she's, doing quite well. But I think about it. I think
Yeah.
about, what if today's the day for her, right? Have I, given her the love she's given me and my kids? And that can show up in a million different ways. But for example, this year she ended up leaving Utah later than she typically does in early December. She went to Montana, where one of my sisters lives, and spent a bit of time. And then she went back to Texas. And for the first time in a very long time, she did not come here or to my sister's for Christmas. And it was something I really thought about, of, what if this is her last Christmas? Right? Would she regret it? Would I regret it? Would my kid? But we had a really candid conversation about it. And she's like, I just can't. Like, all that travel, I'm 83.
Yeah.
I need time before I go somewhere again. I've got great friends and I'll spend it with my great friends.
There's a few things you've touched on throughout this, like even the balance between careers and providing and parenting and also even just this one too, like the kind of it's unavoidable, isn't it? This question, and I'm definitely in a phase of life too where this is far more front of mind for various reasons, and it's this incredible thing that these are these big questions and we can tend to them, and it's not that they can be resolved as such because
Right.
life is just continuing to go along, but just the idea of a candid conversation around something I think does wonders for
Yeah.
handling that ambiguity and the unresolved nature of trying to tend to everything like we sometimes do in life as well.
Yeah.
Kaylyn, throughout the course of this conversation, even if it is that kind of question of the bird and the shoulder and the unknown aspects of this life and trusting ourselves, and some really powerful moments, I think, of coherence and making big decisions that were just inevitable in ways as well.
Mm.
And just also just the idea then of the resilience and putting one foot in front of the other. There's so many things you've shared. I'm really curious to ask you the question of what is a good life for you, Kaylyn?
One thing that I have figured out in the last probably decade of my life that makes it good, right? Because I would have always, I think, told you that a good life for me included being able to do the work I love to do, right? Enabling people to be their best selves, making their jobs easier, making their lives easier. That's something that I really do focus on in my work. And I think I always knew that was where I wanted to spend my time. But I also knew I wanted a family, one way or the other. Even if I hadn't had my own kids, step kids, I wanted a family. I wanted to be able to invest time in that family and all of the joy and pain that comes with that. So that was always true. I always wanted to have time to focus on my health to some degree, both mental and physical. I remember when I was working full time for the first time, that feeling of, how do people do this? Like, right? And around the time that I was struggling with that, there was back when magazines were a thing, there was a magazine article in a woman's magazine about um, everything that experts suggested we do in a day, and they timed it all out, and they were like, oh, this is why you feel bad. We need 28 hours every day, like to do all these things that we're supposed to do, right? Which made me feel better. And then, okay, that's not reasonable. Okay. So, I mean, I think I always was driven to have all of those things in my life. But what I've also realized over the past decade is there are a couple of other things that make it a good life for me. And one of them absolutely is play. I love play, right? Whatever that shows up as, whether it's games, whether it's, for me, skiing is play, like learning a new sport at an older age and really trying to master it, that's play. Um, Going to an escape room, uh, rappelling, right? Canyoning, going whitewater raft, like all of those things that just dip back into who you were when you were 8 years old on your bike, pedaling, across town, thinking you could go as far as you needed to go, even though you couldn't. All of those, I love tapping into that. I love that feeling of freedom that you had as a kid and being able to find that. I find that through play. The other thing that I've started to notice is how much awe I want in a good life. Like, awe fills you up, right? And it grounds you at the same time. I don't know if there's a life after this life. I don't have answers to any of those big questions, but I also don't care in those moments of awe when you see like an amazing sunset or, an amazing sunrise or, where we live, we get to see wild animals and the way that they exist, right? They're very present in the moment, whatever that moment is, those types of things. So I think awe and play would be the things that I've added most recently that make me feel whole.
Oh, that mention of awe there is just, I don't know, resonated with me so strongly, and just the examples you gave, and I think it's the abundance of it if we're attuned to its existence that I think is
True.
so powerful in the context of a good
So,
life.
I mean,
Kaylin,
even in something, because I live in this wild world, right? I mentioned the wildlife, the sunsets, the sunrises, but even we all went to Manhattan last summer, even just walking in Manhattan and seeing the diversity of the people there and looking at the buildings that we've made. Are you kidding? Like, this is incredible, like incredible.
yeah,
So yeah, you can find awe anywhere if you just stop and really look around.
amen to that. Kaylin, look, thank you so much for joining us on the What is a Good Life podcast today. I think there's so much that I'll take from this conversation, so very much appreciated.
Thank you. Can we reverse the conversation sometime?